38%
So let me play devil's advocate on this. Let me speak up for the fan who was angry when they heard that, because as I said, I tend to agree with Jerry, but let me speak up for them. And I don't think there's any way to criticize him for focusing on the draft. He's got to focus on the draft. Like, that's part of the job of being a president of baseball operations, is you can't just have one focus. You're overseeing a gigantic staff. But I'll take the side of the angry fan here for a moment, who says, yeah, I don't think you should have made a decision after that Nationals game. That should have just been the final straw. I wanted to see changes after A, B, C, D, E, F games. Mm-hmm. And just because you're angry after game G doesn't mean you can't make a decision. The decision was basically already made. This should just be all right, because that happened, now we're ready to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah.
And I understand that argument, too. Like, I think there is something to it. I just don't believe that there is an obvious move. I was hoping Stacey was going to be in a little early. I was going to see if I could get her to come in, because I thought she put together a really good poll yesterday, just asking people, what do you believe is the primary reason for the Mariners' struggles? And it was not the manager, although I know there are people out there, turns out to be, I guess, a bit of a loud minority, who say it's the manager. That's not what her poll suggested. 14% of people said it was the manager. 59%, so nearly 6 out of 10, just said poor execution. 22%, 23% say lack of talent. Okay. Well, the lack of talent thing is a conversation. But when your issue is poor execution, what do you do other than to wait for the people executing to do it up to their normal standard?
I voted on talent, by the way.
You did?
I was one of the 22%, and I think that's tied hand in hand with execution, that you just, you get to a point where I'm sorry, you're not completing these passes well enough, and you're not executing well enough, and I am going to point to you're just not talented enough to be in this league long enough. And so to me, those are somewhat hand in hand. The talent's the raw goods you're working with, and obviously the execution is then the performance of it. So I tended to look at AJ Pollock and Colton Wong. The bottom, Dylan Moore, and I kind of looked at it in totality and said, yeah, when I'm watching these other teams that you're losing to come in here, the Tampa Bay Rays today with the number of all-stars they have and players, and just looking at their talent, like that's a more talented team top to bottom. That's a more talented lineup.
That one's hard for me when you've got so many people underperforming. Is Mike Trout not talented? He's having a lousy year. Is Bryce Harper not talented? He's having a lousy year.
Let's pull up Mike Trout's year. And
it's not as bad as AJ Pollock's. Obviously, I'm not making that comp, Brock. But the idea being that guys have a talent that they have reached over the course of a career, not over the course of 3 months.
Correct.
And so judging the quote-unquote talent based on the 3 months where you're obviously not playing up to your expectation, it just doesn't work for me. And I saw somebody text the same thing when Joe was on earlier at 7:30, who said, wait, so let me understand. Scott Service has gotten this team to overperform for a few years. They've underperformed for 3 months, and he's got to pay the price for it? Mm-hmm. That just doesn't really make sense. And so that's why those projections, et cetera, they tell a different story about the amount of talent that's here than the results have shown.
Yeah, and Mike's not been what he's been in the past. Still an 858 OPS, 17
Dude, I'm not telling
runs,
you Mike Trout stinks.
WAR.
Of course.
I know.
He's one of the greatest players of all time.
Yes. And he's not playing to what he's played to in the past, and maybe the litany of injuries that he has suffered over year after year after year after year
catching up
have taken a little bit of a toll on him. And maybe just the legs of AJ Pollock are done, and Colton Wong is just done. But yeah, to me, at least there's a debate. It is obviously the result. It is obviously the lack of execution and performance, and especially in big moments. So I am not trying to say the 59% that voted that way are wrong. I think there's absolutely an argument, and they're probably right. But I do think if they continue down this road, you're going to start to look at the talent. And as Jerry said yesterday, if they can't hit it, well, again, we're going to find new people to hit it.
To have voted, and as I did, and under execution does not mean that the talent is good enough. One does not preclude the other. And Stacey, I thought smartly, was very clear in her poll. You're not saying this is the only cause.
Yep.
What's the primary cause? And I believe that there's not enough talent on the team. I'm with you. And certainly when you look at the bottom of this roster, it doesn't look good enough. And when you're watching Dylan Moore and Colton Wong take key at bats back-to-back in the ninth inning of a tie game, you kind of throw your hands up in the air and say, what are we doing here? No one is saying because the execution has been this bad that the talent is good enough. But if everyone on this offense was playing up to their talent level, I think we'd be having very different conversations heading into the All-Star break about a few more Mariner All-Stars and a team that was right in the thick of things.